Welcome to another episode of All Things Moon, Lunar Wisdom for Everyday Life with myself, Kelly Jones. I'm back. I've been away. It has been a very interesting few weeks. I haven't actually recorded an episode since the end of June. You may, if you're on my All Things Moon group on Facebook, or if you're on my YouTube, if you're a subscriber, and if you're not, please press the subscribe button, press the like button, help me to get this out here. And we've got Mars in Virgo in my house of career at the moment, so I'm fully motivated to be back online sharing with you. But if you had seen my last little very short episode that I put out, which was kind of a little taster of Uranus in Gemini, which I actually recorded because I was auditioning to co-host on Nightlight Astrology podcast with Adam Ellenbass, who is my astrology teacher of Hellenistic astrology. I have done 2 years of training with him, and he was looking for co-hosts for once a month to do a monthly overview and our research for the audition. So what we had to do was a 15-minute podcast on Uranus entering the sign of Gemini. So I have done quite a lot of research. So if you go back and see that little 15-minute video, there'll be a little bit more detail which won't be in here today, because I thought I would take a little bit of time today to catch up with you and let you know where I've been, what I've been up to, what's been occurring in the astrological world of Kelly Jones. So you may or may not be aware, and I hope you're not too aware because you've already had some incidences, but Mercury is currently retrograde. So those of you who've been following me all the way through know that I'm a bit of a technophobe anyway. I always have difficulty getting on here just to record, even though when I do, I absolutely love it. But it's like procrastination station when it comes to technology with me. So normally I have my iPad set up with any of my notes, anything I need to remember to tell you. And to do that, I need to switch off the auto lock so it doesn't keep locking itself. But of course, this is now on, I've just discovered that my iPad's on low battery, so it keeps switching itself off every 30 seconds. So I've kind of got it charging down on my lap here. But the charging point is a little, it's quite old, this iPad. So the charging port is a little kind of switches on and off, on and off. We're actually up to 20% battery now. So these are some of the things that you have to contend with on this side of the camera before we can even contemplate coming on and sharing with you all. So, when you're watching from that side, it looks like we've just flicked the camera on and start speaking, but there's so much more involved. So that's why I will be so appreciative and grateful if you could share this to your friends, subscribe, press the like button, follow me on Spotify, on YouTube. I'm also out there on Apple podcasts, on Amazon Music, on Audible. So there's lots of places. And in fact, if you don't want to sign up to any of those, you can actually go to my website, which is kellyjones.me. That's KELLIE jones.me, and I have got a podcast page on there, so you can just skip all the social medias, skip all the sign-ups and everything, and go straight to my website and have a listen. So lots of options for you. So where have I been? So if you've been listening and following along, I was doing lots of retreats and festivals and in between teaching classes. So I'm actually busier now teaching more classes. And, this is when you have to start taking notice of where you're being guided and what you're being resistant to. Lots of retrogrades going on at the moment, which will make us go into review mode. So we'll be going back over, having a rethink of things. There is another aspect going on right now, which is Mars conjunct the South Node in the sign of Virgo. So for me, that is showing up in my house of career, as I mentioned at the beginning. So Mars is, motivational. Mars is not retrograde, but the South Node is very much to do with our karmic past. So stuff that we've brought through with us from past lives, patterns, and things that we need to move away from in this lifetime by learning what we need to learn. And Mars is currently conjunct the South Node. So to me, that says, without going too deep into it, taking action. Mars is action, taking action on looking at those things those stories that we've written that keep us where we are. It's the comfort zone, the South Node. The North Node is what we're headed to. We might have to face some fears, some reality checks. We've got Saturn retrograde right now, really digging into that reality check. We've got Neptune retrograde at the moment too. So Neptune is the dream, it's the illusion, it's the deception. It's in Aries. So is it self-deception, self-responsibility, Saturn. So combining all of those things, taking a look at what is holding me back. And so if I'm really perfectly honest with you, the two things I would just be happy doing for the rest of eternity, the things that keep me alive, safe, they save me every day from myself, from the outside world, is Strala Yoga. If you watch my channel, I'm always going on about how much I love Strala Yoga and astrology. They're like the two things that absolutely light me up. And my past is that I've been teaching Pilates for a very, very, very long time, and I wanted to come away from that. Previous to all of that, I was a dancer, and I really did not want to give up my dancing career. It was a whole heap of my life lessons that came along with having to stop that, sabotage being one of those. And now we're around to this time at this moment with Mars on the South Node to do with that karmic past stuff. And no matter how hard I have tried to teach Strala Yoga classes on a regular basis, it works very well on retreats and festivals, but on a regular, weekly, local basis, I just cannot seem to get that happening. People just aren't signing up and coming, even though it's the same me at the same studios. It's me no matter what genre I'm teaching. But the Strala is not happening. And it seems though everybody in Chelmsford right now wants Pilates and ballet bar. And through one thing and another, I got asked to cover a bar class, which, I just did it for fun. I've been teaching for 34 years. I'm a dancer. So, easy to just step in and cover a bar class, particularly with my Pilates and dance training background. And then I got asked to do one permanently, and I said yes, but I was not that keen on, putting one on the schedule. But as it turns out, two of the girls that teach bar on a regular basis both can't teach their classes anymore, and they've been handed over to me. And in actual fact, my mum is here from Australia. I picked her up from Gatwick Airport on Sunday without any Mercury retrograde mishaps, got in there just before it turned really strong. And so she's over with us here for 6 weeks. I haven't seen my mum for 2 years in the flesh, albeit that we speak on screen a lot. And she turned 80 last week on the 7th of July, which is my birthday as well. So we share the same birthday. She turned 80, I turned 55. Sounds like a joke every time I say it. And if you were to meet my mum, you'd think she was joking too. And she actually came along to my express 30-minute bar class yesterday and, showed up the youngsters in her leopard print pants doing bar class. She managed it all, and she messaged me today to say that her butt is really aching, but she thinks she might do those exercises every day while she's here. So it seems like, I've been really resistant to doing bar and Pilates, but that is what's working for me right now. So, what we resist persists. So I am going with what people want, even though it has seemed as if it isn't what I want, but I am exploring what it's going to bring me. In the meantime, I am planning, there's a retreat in September I'm doing, which is Astrala Yoga. I will be going to Astrala Yoga training later on this year again because I love it so much. So yeah, what else has been going on? So I've told you my mum is here. So the past week or so has been all about our mums. So as I've told you, my mum is super fit and healthily and lively. We're very alike, and but I was away on a little holiday. So every year on my birthday, we like to and attempt to go to Cornwall. Cornwall is my favourite place in the country that I know of because I haven't been to the whole country, but Cornwall is the energy of Cornwall just always makes me feel better. I feel refreshed when I come back from there, normally. But on this particular trip, it had "don't go" written all over it. When the signs are there. So it has been absolutely boiling hot weather in this country for the past few weeks. In fact, a good sort of 6 weeks or so, we've had really, really hot, humid 30-degree type weather. But the weather forecast for Cornwall was pretty rubbish. So we contemplated not going. We looked at other places where the weather might be better. But ultimately, in the end, we decided to just go where we planned to go. We'd booked into some campsites for our camper van, and we decided to stop on the way down there to break the long journey up because from here to Cornwall, it's about 6 hours drive. So we decided to stop at Dartmoor in Devon, which is a 4.5 hour drive. But, this Mercury retrograde shadow was showing itself always about 2 weeks before it actually happens. We had Uranus just, hovering over the borderline there to move into my sign of Cancer, and to the sign of Gemini, sorry, on my birthday. That's what I was meaning. So on the 7th of July, Uranus was basically hovering on that border between Taurus and Gemini to move into the sign of Gemini for the first time in 84 years. So, a lot of potential for things to go a little bit unexpectedly wrong. So our journey took us 7 hours. So you can imagine I tried to stay optimistic and bright and happy, playing happy music in the camper van. But do you know what? It really did drag me down in the end. I was driving in the worst bit of the traffic, first gear, second gear in my great big camper van. It's really huge. It's quite hard for me to drive because I'm so small. So by the time we got to our campsite, we just wanted to do nothing, cook some dinner and just rest. And when we got there, we realised that I had left the food bag in the fridge here at home, and Tom had left his whole rucksack with all his clothes in it at home. So all he had was what he was wearing, and all we had was a couple of packets of emergency food in the camper van in the cupboard. So, you can imagine the tension going on there. And I knew that when Uranus moved into the sign of Gemini, it was going to be moving into both Tom and I's house of relationships, the seventh house area. So already I could feel like this, this challenge is already here. It's already coming up. Can I stay in a high frequency? It's proving to be difficult. At least we are in Devon and not in Chelmsford at home. So anyway, so when we left that campsite the next morning, we just decided we had to get up, leave early because we needed to go and get some food. Tom needed to buy some clothes. We were booked into a spa on my birthday down in Falmouth in Cornwall. A lovely hydrothermal experience we were booked in for and we paid for. And Tom said even if he had remembered his clothes in his rucksack, he would have not had his swimming shorts anyway because he knew he hadn't packed those. So we definitely had to go to the shops and buy him something. His worst nightmare is to be in a retail park during a sale in a shop with hundreds of people, and that's where we found ourselves. So again, the tension was building. We were, he was very ratty and I was trying to stay calm and just sort everything out. I went into personal shopper mode and I was finding him some clothes. And so we got him some clothes and we eventually got some food. And that was the Saturday. On the Sunday, we had a really nice day, actually. We went to these beautiful gardens called Trebar Gardens, which are on the Helford River Passage. It's got a private beach and the woods, and it's in a valley. It's absolutely stunning. So, I was feeling better that day and actually went to for dinner in a lovely 200-year-old pub, or it might be 300 years old, a pub called the Ferry Boat Inn on the seafront down at Helford River, which I had been reading a book just before we decided where to go. And the Helford River Passage and the Ferry Boat Inn were both in this book, and it was a fictional book. And I looked up to see if they were actually real places, and they were. So they were kind of what, instigated and inspired our direction of travel. So, some things are just meant to be. And so that day was okay. And then Monday morning arrived, 7th of July, my birthday morning. Uranus has just moved into the sign of Gemini. Now, when Uranus moves signs, it usually enters with a bang, a blast, an explosion, something. Expect the unexpected. Anything could happen. And obviously, I was highly aware of our 7th house placement of this movement. So my phone was pinging away and I figured they were birthday messages, which most of them were. And I saw a message on there from Tom's sister saying, "Can you call Dad? Mum is incredibly ill. He's been trying to get through to you, can't get through to you, Mercury." We were on a campsite in Cornwall, 6 hours away from where his parents are. And it turned out that morning, his mum had actually been taken into hospital on Thursday, but they decided not to tell us because they knew we were going on holiday. And she was just having her oxygen levels looked at because she'd had this ongoing cough, and this cough had become a cough that was constant and she couldn't stop coughing. So her oxygen levels were being affected, and she hadn't eaten anything. She couldn't do anything because she was just coughing all the time. And on that morning, her lungs failed, her heart stopped, and she nearly died. And they had to put her in an induced coma and drain her lungs 3 times over. And this all occurred as Uranus moved into the sign of Gemini. And in that moment that Tom took that call and had the sudden shocking realization that he may not see his mum again, we might not get to the hospital in time, all of these things, he turned around and just cried and said, "Oh, I've been so horrible. I'm such a horrible person. I've been so horrible to you. I've ruined your birthday. I was awful to you last night." And we packed up, we drove a 6-hour drive to Kingston Hospital to go and sit with his mum, who was in a coma. And the good news is that 2 days later, after we camped on his parents' driveway for 2 days, she is now home. So she was home yesterday, and she's doing really, really well. And, such a miracle that she is alive. But what has already occurred is that sudden shock has shifted something in our relationship together. There's a sudden deep appreciation for me. He has a deep appreciation for me, and there's some things that have just instantaneously become easier. Now, we've got 7 years to watch how this is going to play out, having Uranus in our house of relationships. So, but that is what's been happening. That's why I've not been around. It was very exhausting. Because we drove all the way down to Cornwall, we drove back from Cornwall to London, we spent a few emotional days in London wondering what was going to happen to his mum. We came back here, we actually went to work for 2 days, gardening in 30-degree heat because it's got hot again here. And then I had to drive to Gatwick, and my mum booked me into a hotel room, and where I had a night to myself in the hotel room with air conditioning. I just went to dinner on my own, and I really needed that little break. So my mum had booked it just so that I didn't have to go and pick her up in the early hours of the morning. But as it turned out, it was just what I needed. And so, yes, as you know, I picked my mum up, and lots of driving. And, it has been extremely hot weather here, which drains you even when things are good. So, that's where we've been. That's what's been occurring. So Uranus in Gemini, it's going to, let me get the dates right here. Let me get my notes up. It's still in low power mode, so forgive me having to look down here with it being on charge. The last time Uranus was in Gemini was between 1941 and 1948, which, I don't really need to remind anybody that was a very significant, massively significant global change. The world changed around that time due to the upheaval of World War II. I was listening to Adam, my teacher, on the Nightlight Astrology channel, and I will put the link to this webinar that he recorded about a year ago about Uranus entering Gemini, and he has shared it on his YouTube channel now. And I think you'll find it very interesting to go and listen to that. And he goes very in depth in there, a lot more than I'm going to be here. So if you really want to dive into it, then I really recommend going to listen to that. But I was listening to him, reminding myself of some things earlier. And he was talking about, one of the things that Uranus in Gemini can bring is all stuff about gender fluidity. So during that World War II time, it was a time when women were called to do men's work because, so many men were at war, that there were lots of roles to be filled, which needed to be filled by the women who had stayed at home. So the synchronicity of him talking about that is that book, that fiction book it's actually called The Returning Tide by Liz Fenwick. And it is set in Cornwall so it's set between 2015 and it goes back to between 1940s to 40 to 48 time, around that time of World War II. And it's a story about two sisters who were twins. And one of them stayed behind in Cornwall, and she became a driver, like, a driving military around. So she had a men's job, because that was considered to be a man's job, being a good driver. And her sister went to become, she did the Morse code breaking. So she was sitting, in the tunnels doing Morse code. So they were both doing that gender, the role swaps, and where the two sort of merge a little. And now that we have this Pluto in Aquarius transformation, Aquarius is very androgynous sign, it's neither very male or very female. And when we look back to 248 years ago, when Pluto was in Aquarius, it's that French Revolution time when we had Marie Antoinette, and men were wearing wigs and makeup and frills and beauty spots and things like this, and it was all very very gay in its way, and gay in the sense of bright and flamboyant. And I think at the moment, where we're seeing in the world this sort of, almost non-binary thing, because Uranus is in Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury, I would describe as a non-binary planet, really, because it doesn't have that sort of yin yang thing that the other planets tend to have. The sun is so masculine and the moon is so feminine, but Mercury, it can be anything it wants to be. It is the ruler of the mutable signs. It's versatile. When Uranus entered Taurus 7 years ago, I had to do the research on this, and forgive me if you've heard me tell this story before, but when Uranus entered Taurus in 2018, it entered Taurus on May the 15th. And May the 15th is the very day that I unexpectedly, out of the blue, ended up having emergency surgery because my appendix had perforated. Uranus had entered Taurus in my 6th house area of my chart. That 6th house area represents our daily routines, what we do every day. It represents our health and well-being and of being of service. And from that day forwards, when I entered the hospital and had my appendix out, it changed the course of my life. I never ever went back to my daily routines, which was running a Pilates and yoga studio for the previous 16 years. It was something that I had been calling for deep inside, was change, and I didn't know how to change. I felt stuck. So sometimes when we feel stuck and we don't know how to change things, these unexpected, shocking changes that these planetary energies can bring are always ultimately for our highest good. We just might not see it at the time. Me being a Sagittarius rising, I tend to have that sort of big picture view of things, that philosophical way of looking at things, where I can join the dots and find the higher learning that we were supposed to find. Albeit that sometimes, like any of us, when we're right in the middle of the drama and the chaos, and our nervous systems are on red alert, we might not just see it then. But I say this to reassure you and not to get you to be all scared about what might come with these big planetary shifts that we have going on. Also, I do know that I was looking back in researching Uranus entering Taurus, and going right back then to 7 years ago, reading people's blogs and stuff about it, they were talking about, is this the end of money? Is it the beginning of a cashless society? And albeit that hasn't happened to the extreme that some thought it might happen, nevertheless, it is widespread now that there's a lot of places that don't want you to use cash. It's become normal to not use cash, even though I'm a cash girl. I like using cash. I want to keep that going because I like to have secrets and I don't like everyone knowing what I've spent my money on, Because, Taurus rules money. Uranus is to do with technological things, like the internet, AI, all of this kind of stuff. So, money going digital was not unexpected with Uranus in Taurus. Now that it's entered Gemini, it's going to speed all of that up. Gemini is to do with communications. As I said, the internet. I wouldn't be surprised if we start, appearing in where I can speak to my mum on screen. It might not be that long before we can materialize as a, I can't think of the word that I want, an image in the actual room. Not to actually touch, but we might be, I'm thinking a little bit Star Trek here. Beam me up, Scotty. So also during the last time before, as I said, Uranus was in Gemini 1941 to 48, but at the end of that, obviously Uranus had been in Taurus previous to that. And that was when they saw the rise of the dictator like Hitler and Mussolini, for instance. And so as Uranus enters Gemini and we have Pluto in Aquarius, these freedom-loving signs, I really do have this sense of hope that we're going to come to the end in the next 7 years of this extreme dictatorship that we find ourselves in right now. But it is not unusual for that to happen whilst Uranus is moving through Taurus, and we had Pluto moving through Capricorn, didn't we? And now there is this massive shift into these air signs. The air signs love to be free, to be flying free. So, Uranus wants progress. It wants change, whether you're ready for it or not. Being in Gemini, it's intellectual awakening. It's rapid technological advancements and a greater call for freedom of thought and expression. So as Saturn goes retrograde right now back into Pisces and Neptune is retrograde, we might see some of that, they're just going back over, finishing off that deception, that restriction on our spiritual expression. Uranus is going to retrograde in Gemini in September, so it's going to be going forwards now until September the 6th, and then it'll be retrograding back into Taurus November the 7th. So I'm fully aware. So, the reason I tell you all of this is to try and give you some little bit of foresight. So from my own perspective, I know that if Uranus is going to be going back into Taurus, it's going to be doing one last little round back into my 6th house. So albeit that it's not maybe going to come with the entrance that it made, I am already plotting and planning ahead and becoming aware of the fact that it's going to make me reflect on my daily routines, my health and well-being, and how I wish to be of service through those things, through those subjects. And my little inkling in here is that I really need to upgrade my looking after my health. there's nothing, I don't think I feel like there's anything wrong with me right now, but I've just had little, intuitive hits. And I'm going to say that I really need to step up my plan. In comparison to a lot of people's, it's very good, but it can still be better. So an upgrade in the health and well-being zones. So these extra classes that I'm teaching, doing bar, are going to, naturally make me a little bit fitter than maybe I have been recently. So what else can I do to add to that? So my advice to you on all of this is to sit down and have a little reflect over the past 7 years. Have a little look at, what might have changed very recently. Let me know your stories if you've got one. I'd love to hear from you of any kind of, anything that's occurred for you since Uranus has moved into Gemini, since the 7th of July. We've got this Saturn and Neptune retrograde. We've got the Mercury retrograde. And I'm going to be recording some more podcasts today to put out this week. So I'll be going over some of these subjects a little bit more. We've also got a new moon in Leo coming up on the 24th. So I'll be holding a new moon online ceremony that evening. So I'll be popping the details in the show notes for that. So I'll be going into all of this a lot more during the moon ceremony. And that new moon is going to be in an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, Lord of the underworld, versus the Leo lion. So we've got a lot of interestingly intense fire and air energies going on right now. So all of those things combined, I would suggest that it really is some time to sit down and reflect, get your journal out, look back over the past 7 years where Uranus was in Taurus, things like that. And, maybe start to notice where the energy is shifting. If you would like to know exactly where all of this is occurring in your chart, then you can book a birth chart reading with me where we can really look at that for you. I really haven't got time for you to just ask me to have a quick look for you and find out where it is. It really will need us to sit together for at least, my sessions are 90 minutes and I do a lot of notes for you beforehand. Also, any of you who have already had an in-depth birth chart reading with me, I have finally put up on my website the opportunity for you to have a quick fire catch up on your chart, because obviously everything's moving and we can have a look to see where you're at. If you've got a burning question, we've already gone deep into your chart, so we can just look at a specific thing. Then I'm offering 30-minute sessions, but just to take note that those 30-minute sessions are if you have already had the 90 minutes with me. Please don't book that if you've not already had your birth chart done. So I have written that on there, but just to take note of that. So anyway, that's 38 minutes I have been waffling on for. I thought I was going to be a little bit rusty, but actually, I can talk. It's Uranus in Gemini, chatty, fast. So, I'd love to hear from you, and just reminding you to please press the subscribe button, press the like button, share this with anybody that you think, really could do with this information, that it would be helpful. And I wish you all a wonderful week, and I will see you again during this week, because there's going to be a few podcasts coming out, slightly shorter ones on little separate subjects. So wishing you all new moon blessings if I don't see you before.